What's up, fellow creators? I know it's been a while since I put out a video, but we're currently on the downside of the peak of wedding season. Last year I said I was going to do 30 weddings, and I think I booked about 40 weddings this year with the Fuji XT3 and the GH5. And side note, I actually got married myself a few weeks ago, so I've been busy with that as well. But in this video, I just want to compare the GH5 and the Fuji XT3. So for my current setup for videography is two Fuji XT3s, and the GH5 is my safety wide. And I've had this setup all year since I switched, and I filmed about 25 weddings, and I just want to do a quick comparison. It's not going to be super technical. I just want to give you kind of a pros and cons point chart just to see if you're in the market for either of these two cameras. So first off, we're going to go over price. Last time I checked, the Fuji XT3 is $14.99 for just the body. When I purchased the Fuji XT3s, they had a sale for $15.99. It came with the battery grip, and I've seen it since throughout the years, so you can easily get that deal if you wait for it. Last time I checked today, and the GH5 is $13.97, and the GH5XS is about $2,000. Next thing we're going to talk about is low light, and this is huge for weddings. And the Fuji XT3, I have taken it up to 6000 ISO, no problem, still has a clean image. The GH5, on the other hand, 800 is probably the max, because once you get it go in increments, once it goes from 8 to 1600 is, in my opinion, almost unusable. It's very grainy. So in my opinion, the Fuji XT3 gets low light. So next is sensor. The Fuji XT3 is an APS-C. It's a 1.5 crop. GH5 is micro four thirds. It's smaller. It's essentially a 2.0. So if sensor size is that big to you, then obviously the Fuji is going to get it for the sensor size. Next thing we're going to talk about is recording capabilities. The XT3 can shoot 420 10-bit internally at 60 frames per second, 400 megabits a second, and it can shoot externally 422 10-bit up to 60 frames per second externally. The GH5 can shoot, that's the big difference between the two, the GH5 can shoot 422 10-bit 24 frames per second internally. So I guess that's, they both shoot 422, but on the GH5 it's going to be internally versus the XT3, if that made any sense. So I guess we'll give that to the GH5. But me personally, on that note, if that doesn't mean anything to you, they both shoot 4K 60. And for me, when I shoot weddings, I never shoot 400 frames per second or 400 megabits a second. I don't want to end up with half a terabyte of footage at the end of each wedding. For the Fuji XT3, even 60 frames per second, I shoot 100 megabits a second because, like I said, I don't want a ton of footage at the end of the day. And so me, at the end of a wedding between two Fuji XT3s and a GH5, I'll end up with roughly 180 to 250 gigs of footage. All right, the next thing we'll talk about is card slots. They both have 2 card slots. However, for video, the GH5 simultaneously records the video in both slots, where the XT3 does not. It will do it for photo, but not for video, so that's pretty huge, which for that point would go to GH5. However, if you want to do a record in the Fuji XT3, you just got to get a monitor, and that's one way to work around it, because then you can record inside the monitor as well. The next thing we're going to talk about is autofocus. Most of you guys know the GH5 is not known to have good autofocus, and it doesn't. It's not reliable, especially for weddings. And coming from Canon, I was a super big crutch on autofocus. I used it all day, which is another huge reason why I love the XT3, is because the autofocus to me is just as good as Canon. I use autofocus all day in my weddings. The only caveat on that is just some of their older lenses does not have good autofocus for video. It's going to be like the 56 1.2 and their older 23 and 35 mil, but all their newer f2 weather sealed lenses, the 23, the 35, and the 50 f2, along with their 50 to 140, which is essentially a 70 to 200, I use autofocus on all those lenses all day long, and it's absolutely amazing. And the only time I don't use autofocus is when the bride and groom are up top, and I'll get focus, and then I'll just turn it off just so it's locked, so I can run around and check out the other cameras to make sure everything's good. Same with speeches. I use a mic stand just for that reason, because once the speaker comes up, I'll lock the autofocus on their face, and that allows me to run back, check the audio with the DJ, and then check my other camera for my second shot on the couple. So with all that, autofocus definitely goes to the Fuji X-T3. The next thing we're going to talk about is stabilization, which is a hands down winner for the GH5. Their in-body stabilization is seriously crazy. It's literally like it's on a tripod if you hold it tight to your chest. The Fuji X-T3 has no in-body stabilization. But for me, and this is going to come to the choice. I don't shoot handheld. I personally hate shaky footage when it comes to weddings, and it can be done on the GH5. But for me, I use tripods, and when it's not on a tripod, it's going to be on a gimbal. For that, stabilization is definitely going to go to GH5. So the next thing we're going to talk about is video features. Both cameras have a variety of different features. They both have focus peaking, exposure zebras, histograms, and a variety of different other features. Both of these cameras have log profiles. However, I personally don't use them. Just like the storage, I want the cameras to get the nicest in-camera image as possible. It just makes editing a lot easier. And when I'm doing 40 weddings a year, I don't want to be dealing with log. So for me, X-T3, I use Eterna, and it looks really nice straight out. The skin tones are really nice. The GH5, I got a picture profile from Scott McKenna from Wedding Film School, and those two picture profiles actually match pretty well. The GH5 has a little more yellow, but they can easily be color graded to match. I would not want to match Fuji X-T3 with Sony or Canon. Just for whatever reason, these picture profiles go really nice together. So for that, video features, I think it's just a tie. They both have very similar video features. But if I did have to pick a color, I think I would give it to the Fuji X-T3. I'd personally just like the skin tones and just the look of it straight out of camera, especially when shooting Eterna. The next thing we're going to talk about is the screen. So the GH5 has a fully articulating screen. Just like the Canon 80D, I love it. It's nice. I'm not a vlogger, so it's not super important to me. It is nice to have. The Fuji X-T3, if you can see it, there's a Fuji filming me right now, but it's kind of like the Sony. It pops out, so you go like that, you can go down, and then you actually have a side flip. And to me, shooting weddings, it's actually perfect because when the bride comes down the aisle, I'm always on the right side. So having it pop out to the right, it's perfect because I usually just set up my tripod here, and usually the photographer is like right next to me, just shooting over my camera, and we both can get the groom's reaction. And for everything else, I'm right behind the camera, whether on a gimbal or speeches. I can still, if I have the tripod up high, I can still look down. So for me, articulating screen definitely wins it, but the huge part that I love about the X-T3 is just the quality. I don't know the full specs, but for whatever reason on the X-T3, it looks so much better. When you look at it, it's more what you see is what you get. It's just so crisp, and I can trust it. Versus like the GH5, it's nice, but it seems like it takes a little more concentration to look to make sure my colors are correct. It's just a little bit softer. So the quality of the screen on the back is way better on the X-T3. I absolutely love that. So for me, even though it does have a fully articulating screen, I'm gonna give the screen to the Fuji X-T3. The last thing we'll talk about is photography. The GH5 is obviously no one's gonna use that for a photography camera. However, the Fuji X-T3, if you're a hybrid shooter, it actually is a fairly nice photography camera. I've owned the 5D4, I've owned the Sony a7 III. I will say the images are a little sharper on those two cameras, but the Fuji X-T3, it's got dual card slot for photo. It's very good in low light. I've shot actually a handful of weddings for photography on this. I get booked way more for videography, but I do get some photo weddings, and I absolutely love it. I have the 56 1.2, and with that low aperture, you really can't even tell that it's a crop sensor. So with that, I'll definitely give the point to Fuji X-T3. So with all that said, I personally love the Fuji X-T3 over the GH5. That's what suits my needs. I wanted good autofocus. I wanted good low light. I love the screen and I love the colors and the fact that it is a photography camera as well. To me, the only thing the GH5, which I wish was in the X-T3, was the dual card recording and the in-body stabilization, which is absolutely amazing. And again, this is my opinion based upon what suits me best. It may not suit you. You just have to weigh the pros and cons and decide what is more important to you as a creator. So I hope you got something out of this video. I'll leave a link to my wedding YouTube channel just so you can see examples of wedding film shot on the Fuji XT3. If you have any questions, make sure you guys leave in the comment section below, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.